The concept of mounting a heavy infantry gun on a tank chassis was born out of the requirement to provide effective destructive firepower against enemy-fortified positions. The need for a well-protected vehicle armed with a 15-centimeter gun arose in late 1942. At that time, the Germans were bogged down attempting to take the city of Stalingrad. Due to the urgent demand for such a weapon system, a small series of semi-improvised vehicles armed with a 15-centimeter gun placed inside an armored superstructure would be built on the StuG III chassis, creating the Sturminfanteriegeschütz 33 or StuIG 33 for short. Based on experience gained during the First World War, some officers within the German army, such as Erich von Manstein, argued for the introduction of well-armed and protected assault guns. These, later known as Sturmgeschütz, or assault guns, or StuG, were meant to act as highly mobile artillery vehicles that were intended to provide close infantry support by destroying enemy-fortified positions. The first production vehicles reached the troops at the start of the Western Campaign in May of 1940. Despite the small number of vehicles used, they quickly showed that a mobile, protected, and well-armed assault gun was capable of providing adequate infantry support. While the StuG IIIs were well suited for their designated infantry support roles, there were never enough of them. As a result, the main artillery firepower for infantry formations came in the form of towed support guns. One of these was the 15-centimeter Sturminfanteriegeschütz, or heavy infantry gun 33. It had sufficient firepower to destroy all but the most fortified enemy positions. While the 15-centimeter gun offered great firepower, its weight severely limited its mobility. Moving a heavy gun was tiresome and it took time to set up properly. These shortcomings became obvious after the Polish campaign in 1939. Shortly after this campaign, a request was made to develop a self-propelled version of the gun. Given that designing a brand new chassis would take a long time and precious resources, the Germans went for the simplest possible solution and used what they had available in the form of the obsolete Panzer I. A 15-centimeter SIG 33 was placed on this chassis, protected by a 3-sided armored superstructure. This led to the creation of a rather awkward vehicle that, on the one hand, solved the problems with the mobility of the 15-centimeter, but was plagued with many other issues on the other. Namely, the chassis proved to be too weak and prone to malfunctions because of the extra weight. The crew was poorly protected and only a few rounds could be carried inside. Despite all the problems, a small production run of 38 vehicles was made. This vehicle was intended to be used as mobile artillery, although it was occasionally used in direct fire. While its gun was effective at close ranges, other factors such as a high silhouette and weak chassis made using it in such a directly aggressive way highly dangerous. In the summer of 1942, the Germans and their allies launched a new offensive with the aim of capturing the resource-rich Caucasus and cut off any Soviet use of the lower Volga for transporting troops, materiel, and resources. The fighting around and for the city of Stalingrad was notoriously vicious. The Soviets desperately tried to defend it, as the loss of the city would have doomed the troops fighting in the Caucasus and afforded the Germans to concentrate their forces elsewhere and recuperate. The Germans had to fight for every street and building. As the Soviets were well entrenched, the Germans had great difficulty dislodging them. The issue was discussed at a meeting on the 20th of September 1942 between army officials and Adolf Hitler. During the meeting, it was agreed that a new vehicle capable of leveling entire houses with a few rounds was desperately needed. It was meant to engage targets at close range, so it had to be well protected. Given the urgency of the project, a small series of 12 vehicles was to be built within a 2-week period. This meant that this vehicle had to be built using existing tools and equipment. The armament chosen was the 15-centimeter SIG 33 heavy gun. For the chassis, the Panzer III and IV were to be tested in order to establish if this gun could be installed inside their turrets. This proved impossible, so a temporary solution, the StuG III chassis, was to be used instead. Given that the company Alket was responsible for construction of the StuG III, it was tasked with developing this new vehicle. In theory, the cheapest way to produce this modification would be to mount the 15-centimeter inside the StuG III. In reality, this was not possible because of the large size of the gun, so a completely new superstructure had to be designed from scratch. The frontal armor was to be 80 mm thick. Due to the urgency of the project, any available StuG III chassis were reused for the construction. In essence, this meant reusing older chassis which were either being used for training or from damaged vehicles that had returned to Germany for repairs. Because of this urgency and rather simple conversion process for the StuIG 33, the first 6 vehicles were completed on the 7th of October 1942, and the remaining 6 3 days later. On the 13th of October, all 12 were ready for service. The remaining 12 from the second series were reported ready by mid-November of 1942. Given the vehicle's improvised nature and the fact that its design arose from the fighting in Stalingrad, no further vehicles were ordered. The StuIG 33's hull can be divided into 3 major sections. These were the forward-mounted transmission, the central crew compartment, and the rear engine compartment. The front hull was where the transmission and steering systems were placed, and it was protected by angled armor plates. As different StuG III chassis were used for the StuIG 33's construction, there were still some minor differences between them. For example, the StuG III Ausf-E used smaller cast hinges for the 2 glacis hatches. The suspension was the standard StuG III type, which consisted of 6 road wheels on each side. These were suspended using a combination of individual swing axles together with torsion bars, which were placed in the bottom of the hull. Once again, due to its somewhat accelerated development, any StuG III chassis that was available on hand was reused for it. You can see this most in the suspension, which often had mixed components from older and newer StuG IIIs. The use of different types of front drive sprockets and rear idlers was common on the StuIG 33. The added weight of the gun and the superstructure to the front of the vehicle caused significant problems with the front road wheels and the transmission, which were prone to breakdowns. The StuIG 33 was powered by the standard StuG III Maybach HL120 TRM engine. With this power unit, the maximum speed was only 20 km per hour. The superstructure had a simple box-shaped design. On the front of the superstructure, an opening was placed for the gun. To the rear, there were 2 hatches, with each of them featuring small pistol ports. On top, there was 1 hatch located in the bottom left corner. In addition, there was an opening for the gunner's periscope. To avoid dust, rain, or enemy grenades falling inside, a small protective roof was added on the top of it. Lastly, there was a round opening for the ventilation port. Given that no such ventilation unit was fitted on any of the 24 StuIG 33 vehicles, it was simply covered by a round armor plate. The main armament of this vehicle was a 15cm SIG-33 infantry gun. It was a reliable and robust weapon that was easy to build and required very little maintenance. The 15cm SIG-33 fired a 38 kg heavy high explosive round at a maximum range of 4.7 km or almost 3 miles. This high explosive round during the explosion created a lethal area of around 100 to 120 meters wide and almost 15 meters deep. The rate of fire was low at only 2 to 3 rounds per minute. This was due to the heavy weight of the shells and the use of separate 2-part ammunition. Only 30 rounds were carried inside of the StuIG 33. When on the march, the gun was held in place by a front-mounted travel lock. During the construction of the Panzer I-based modification, the whole gun with its trailing leg and wheels were simply placed on top of the almost unmodified hull. While this made the replacement of damaged parts or the removal of the gun easier, it added unnecessary weight and height. Given that the StuIG 33 was meant to have an enclosed superstructure, using a whole gun assembly was impossible. Luckily for the Germans, Škoda was developing a modified version of this gun, known as the 15cm SIG-33-1. This version was intended to be used on Škoda's own self-propelled gun project, which was delayed due to the great need for anti-tank vehicles based on the Panzer 38T's chassis. In this modified version, the 15cm 33-1 had its wheels and trailing leg removed. As a result, the gun could easily be installed in any fighting vehicle capable of carrying its weight. The 33-1 gun was positioned slightly offset from the center to the right. The gun's vertical rectangular opening was covered by a simple flat and sliding armor plate, which moved with the gun when elevating. There were 2 parallel guiding rail plates bolted to the front armor placed on opposite sides of the gun's opening. When the gun was highly elevated, there was an opening below it. To prevent bullets from entering the fighting compartment through it, the Germans added a small sliding armor plate. When the gun mantlet plate was fully raised, it fell down and covered the small opening. The secondary armament consisted of one 7.92mm MG34 machine gun. Lastly, the crew was also provided with a couple 9mm MP40 submachine guns. Given the specialized role that the StuIG III was meant to perform, it had to be well protected. Because the Germans had not yet fully introduced 80mm thick plates, as a temporary solution, bolted armor was used. While it slightly complicated overall production, the Germans never noted any major issue with bolted armor plates, which were commonly used on the StuG III series and other vehicles up to the war's end. The crew of the StuIG III consisted of 5, a commander, 2 loaders, a driver, and a gunner. Immediately after completion, the first 12 vehicles were sent to the Eastern Front. They arrived near the Don River on the 28th of October 1942. Half of them were given to the Sturmgeschütz Abteilung 117, and the remaining half to the 244th. Unfortunately, there is no surviving record of the 12 vehicles that saw service at Stalingrad. Given the heavy fighting, they likely saw extensive combat action and were destroyed. The second group was initially attached to the Lehr-Abteilung 17, a training unit. Given the deteriorating situation at Stalingrad, especially after the Soviet encirclement of the 6th Army, these vehicles were part of the German relief force, which failed to break enemy lines. During the fighting, 5 vehicles were lost. The remaining 7 vehicles were allocated to the Gruppe Burgstaller or Burgstaller Group, an ad hoc military unit. In April 1943, Gruppe Burgstaller and its vehicles were integrated into the 23rd Panzer Division, a division which was in the process of rearmament and reorganization itself. As part of the 23rd, the StuIG III saw at least some combat action in its fighting around the Meuse and Dnieper rivers. At the end of May, this unit sent a combat report about the overall performance of the StuIG III. We advise close cooperation with tanks, since the self-propelled gun can destroy anti-tank guns and artillery positions at ranges up to 3,500 meters. Enemy tank assembly positions were effectively obliterated. We note that it is very effective against buildings, also infantry and anti-tank rifle positions. The gun did not achieve direct armor penetration when used against tanks. Mechanical maintenance is guaranteed only when used in conjunction with a tank regiment. During the assault by our tank forces against concealed positions, all were overrun and occupied. An advance in stages was carried out only under the cover of accompanying armored infantry. The mounting bolts on the gun's cradle's armor are too weak. The commander's cupola is too small to provide good observation. The hatch impedes vision to the right. The vehicle is front heavy. The second running wheels are overloaded. The engine is underpowered and the clutch is too weak, and the brakes wear out too quickly. On May 11, 1943, 3 vehicles were reported to be fully operational, while the remaining 4 were under repair. The last vehicle was reported lost in October of 1943. This concludes our look at the StuIG III. What do you think about this overarmed StuG? Would it have been effective if used in greater numbers? Would you like to learn more about infantry support vehicles? Let us know in the comments. If you haven't already, consider becoming a subscriber so you don't miss out on a single video. If you want to contribute more directly, consider Patreon or PayPal. The money comes back to you in the form of bigger and better videos. Until next time, keep us in your sights.